In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, Robert and Jennifer Hawthorne seem to have it all: wealth, power, and a picture-perfect family. But when a shocking revelation threatens to shatter their carefully crafted facade, they're forced to confront a dark legacy that will push their love, loyalty, and morals to the breaking point. As they navigate a treacherous underworld of corruption and deceit, the Hawthornes must decide how far they're willing to go to protect their family and redeem their name. Will their journey towards redemption cost them everything they hold dear, or will it unveil a truth more powerful than they ever imagined? In the glittering heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams were as big as the billboards in Times Square, lived Robert Hawthorne, a man who seemed to have it all. At 45, Robert was the epitome of the American dream, a self-made millionaire with a golden touch that turned every business venture into a fortune. On a crisp autumn morning, Robert stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, surveying the city below like a king overlooking his domain. The early sunlight glinted off his Rolex, a proud symbol of his success. He adjusted his bespoke Armani suit, a habit born of years of board meetings and power lunches. "Darling, have you seen my Hermes tie?" Robert called out, his voice echoing through the marbled halls of their 10,000-square-foot palace in the sky. Jennifer Hawthorne, Robert's wife of 15 years, emerged from their walk-in closet, tie in hand. At 40, she was a vision of elegance and intelligence, her success as a respected attorney evident in her confident stride. "Here you go, Robert," she said, handing him the silk accessory. "Don't forget, we have the charity gala for underprivileged children tonight." Robert nodded absently, his mind already racing with the day's possibilities. Of course, I'll be there. First, I have some business to attend to." Jennifer's brow furrowed slightly. She'd noticed Robert's increasing distraction lately, the late nights, the hushed phone calls. But she pushed the thoughts aside. After all, this was Robert, her brilliant, successful husband who had given her and their 2 children a life of luxury beyond imagination. As Robert descended in the private elevator, his phone buzzed. A text from his bookie flashed across the screen. "Big race today. Sure thing. Double or nothing." Robert's heart raced, a familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He'd been on a losing streak lately, but today felt different. Today, he'd turn it all around. "I'm in," he texted back, fingers trembling slightly. Hours later, Robert sat in a dimly lit bar, his usual charisma replaced by a pallor of disbelief. The TV above the bar replayed the race he'd just lost, a race that had cost him not just millions, but everything. "Another scotch," he mumbled to the bartender, loosening his Hermes tie. His phone buzzed incessantly. Jennifer, wondering where he was. The charity gala had started an hour ago. As he nursed his drink, the reality of his situation began to sink in. It wasn't just this race. It was months of bad bets, of chasing losses, of dipping into company funds to cover his debts. And now it had all come crashing down. Back at the penthouse, Jennifer paced anxiously. The children, Timothy and Sarah, had long since gone to bed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The shrill ring of the landline pierced the silence. Jennifer answered, her voice tight with worry. "Hello, Mrs. Hawthorne? This is Charles Weber from First National Bank. I'm calling about some irregularities in your accounts." Jennifer's world began to spin. As Mr. Weber detailed the overdrawn accounts, the missed payments, the mortgages taken out on properties she didn't even know they owned, she sank onto the plush sofa, her knees weak. Just then, the elevator dinged. Robert stumbled in, his usual swagger replaced by a defeated slouch. One look at Jennifer's face told him she knew. "Robert," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What have you done?" The floodgates opened. Robert confessed everything of the gambling, the losses, the desperate attempts to recoup. Tears streamed down his face as he revealed the bitter truth. They had lost it all. The penthouse, the vacation homes, the children's college funds, gone. Jennifer listened in stunned silence, her mind reeling. How could this happen? How could the man she thought she knew throw away their entire life on a bet? As dawn broke over the city, casting long shadows across their soon-to-be-lost home, Robert and Jennifer sat in silence. The weight of their new reality pressed down on them like a physical force. "What do we do now?" Jennifer finally asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Robert looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've ruined everything. Our life, our children's future. I'm so sorry, Jennifer." As the first rays of sunlight crept into the room, illuminating the remnants of their once perfect life, Jennifer made a silent vow. She would find a way through this, for herself and for her children. But as she looked at the broken man beside her, she wondered if their marriage could survive the fall of Robert Hawthorne's empire. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. The sins of the past were about to catch up with them, and the true test of their love, loyalty, and moral fiber was yet to come. The Hawthorne penthouse, once a symbol of opulence and success, now felt like a gilded cage. Jennifer paced the living room, her designer heels clicking against the marble floors that would soon belong to someone else. The weight of Robert's confession from the night before hung heavy in the air. "How could you?" Jennifer's voice cracked as she turned to face her husband. Robert sat slumped on the Italian leather sofa, his head in his hands. "Our entire life savings, gone? And for what? A horse race?" Robert looked up, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. "It wasn't just one race, Jen. It's been going on for a while." "How long?" Jennifer demanded, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "And don't you dare lie to me, Robert. Not now." "A year. Maybe more," Robert admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "It started small, just a bit of fun. But then I lost, and I tried to win it back. And you lost everything," Jennifer finished, her tone icy. "Our home, our children's future. God." "Robert, what were you thinking?" Robert stood up abruptly, a flash of his old fire in his eyes. "I was thinking I could fix it. I was trying to cover." He stopped short, but Jennifer caught the hesitation. "Cover what, Robert?" The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, Robert spoke, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My father's sins, all right? I was trying to cover my father's sins." Jennifer stared at him, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Your father was a respected businessman. He built this empire you just gambled away." Robert laughed bitterly. "Is that what you think? God, Jen, you have no idea. The respected Charles Hawthorne built this empire on blood money and broken lives." The revelation hit Jennifer like a physical blow. She sank onto the sofa, her mind reeling. "Explain," she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert paced the room, years of pent-up secrets spilling out. Dad wasn't just in real estate. That was the front. The real money came from other sources. Drugs, mostly. He had connections with cartels, used his properties to launder money. Jennifer felt sick. "And you knew about this?" "Not at first," Robert said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I found out a few years ago after he died. There were people, dangerous people, who came looking for debts they said he owed." "Why didn't you tell me?" Jennifer asked, hurt and anger warring in her voice. "I thought I could handle it," Robert exploded. "I paid them off, used company funds. But they kept coming, and I thought if I could just hit it big, make back what I'd lost, and then some, I could finally put it all to rest." Jennifer stood up, her legal mind already racing. "We need to go to the authorities, Robert. We can't dash." "No!" Robert's vehemence startled her. "You don't understand, Jen. These people, they're not the type you can just turn in. They have connections everywhere. If we talk, we're dead." The gravity of the situation settled over them like a shroud. Jennifer's eyes darted to the framed family photo on the mantel, her children's smiling faces a stark reminder of what was at stake. "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice small in the cavernous room. Before Robert could answer, a sharp knock at the door made them both jump. They exchanged a panicked look. Robert moved towards the door, but Jennifer held him back. "Wait," she whispered. She grabbed her phone, ready to call 911 if needed, and approached the door cautiously. Taking a deep breath, she opened it. A man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Mrs. Hawthorne? I'm Victor Delgado. I believe your husband and I have some business to discuss." Jennifer felt Robert stiffen beside her. The name meant nothing to her, but Robert's reaction told her everything she needed to know. This was one of the dangerous people he'd mentioned. "Now's not a good time, Mr. Delgado," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice steady. Delgado's smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. "I'm afraid this can't wait. You see, I've heard some troubling rumors about the Hawthorne finances. I'm here to ensure that certain obligations are met." The threat, though veiled, was clear. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. "Give us a day," Robert interjected, his voice strained. "We'll have everything sorted by then." Delgado considered for a moment, then nodded. 24 hours, Mr. Hawthorne. Not a minute more." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and do give my regards to your charming children. Timothy's about to start high school, isn't he? And little Sarah, she must be, 10 now?" The door closed behind him, leaving Robert and Jennifer standing in shocked silence. The mention of their children, the implicit threat, hung in the air like poison. "Oh God, Robert," Jennifer breathed. "What have you gotten us into?" Robert had no answer. As the reality of their situation sank in, Jennifer made a decision. She walked to Robert's study, ignoring his questions, and began rifling through his desk. "What are you doing?" Robert asked, panic edging his voice. Jennifer turned to him, determination blazing in her eyes. "Finding the truth. All of it. If we're going to survive this, Robert, I need to know everything. No more secrets." As she pulled out a hidden compartment in the desk, a stack of old documents spilled out. The yellowed papers bore the Hawthorne Company logo, but the contents— Jennifer's eyes widened as she scanned the first page. "Robert," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" Robert looked at the documents, his face ashen. "The beginning of the end," he said softly. "Dad's original deals with the cartels. Dates, names, amounts, everything." Jennifer clutched the papers, her mind racing. In her hands, she held the key to unraveling a decades-old criminal empire. But at what cost? As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across their once-perfect life, Jennifer and Robert Hawthorne stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with danger, moral dilemmas, and the potential for redemption or ruin. Little did they know, their journey into the heart of darkness was only just beginning. The soft glow of a laptop screen illuminated Jennifer's face as she pored over the documents she'd discovered. The penthouse was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of paper and the muffled sounds of New York City life far below. Robert paced nervously behind her, casting frequent glances at the door as if expecting Victor Delgado to burst in at any moment. "I can't believe this," Jennifer muttered, her voice a mix of disgust and disbelief. "Your father, he was laundering money for the Sinaloa cartel? Robert, do you have any idea how deep this goes?" Robert ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I knew it was bad, Jen, but I never looked at the details. I just wanted it to go away." Jennifer spun in her chair to face him, her eyes blazing. "Well, it didn't go away, did it? It just got worse. And now we're in the middle of it." As if on cue, Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. "It's Delgado. He wants to meet. Tonight." Jennifer stood up, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "We need to be smart about this, Robert. We can't just walk into a meeting with a cartel representative unprepared. What choice do we have?" Robert's voice cracked with desperation. "If we don't show up, he'll dash." "I know." Jennifer cut him off, not wanting to hear the threat against their children verbalized again. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "We'll go, but we're doing this my way." An hour later, They found themselves in a dimly lit bar in the meatpacking district. The place reeked of stale beer and broken dreams. Jennifer clutched her designer handbag tightly, acutely aware of the USB drive hidden inside, loaded with copies of Charles Hawthorne's incriminating documents. Victor Delgado sat in a corner booth, his designer suit out of place in the grimy surroundings. He smiled as Robert and Jennifer approached, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne," he greeted them smoothly. "I'm so glad you could join me. Please sit." They slid into the booth, Jennifer positioning herself between Robert and Delgado. She'd be damned if she'd let her husband face this alone. "Let's cut to the chase," Jennifer said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We know about the arrangement between the Hawthorne Corporation and your organization. We also know it ended with Charles Hawthorne's death." Delgado's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've done your homework, Mrs. Hawthorne. I'm impressed. But you see, in our line of work, arrangements don't simply end. There's always a balance to be maintained." "A balance?" Robert sputtered. "I've been paying your people for years. How much more do you want?" Delgado's smile turned cold. "It's not about want, Mr. Hawthorne. It's about need. Your father's empire provided a valuable service. With it gone, we find ourselves in a difficult position." Jennifer leaned forward, her voice low. "And what exactly is it you need from us?" "Smart woman," Delgado chuckled. "Always getting to the point. We need a new pipeline, Mrs. Hawthorne. A way to move our product and our money without raising suspicion. Your husband's gambling debts have made that complicated." Robert flinched at the mention of his addiction, but Jennifer pressed on. "And if we refuse?" Delgado's eyes hardened. "I don't think you want to explore that option, Mrs. Hawthorne. Think of your children. Think of your reputation. One phone call and everything you've worked for could crumble." Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine, but she maintained her composure. "We need time to consider our options." "Time is a luxury you don't have," Delgado said, standing up. "You have 48 hours to provide us with a viable plan. After that," he let the threat hang in the air. As Delgado walked away, Jennifer and Robert sat in stunned silence. The gravity of their situation pressed down on them like a physical weight. "What are we going to do?" Robert whispered, his voice breaking. Jennifer's mind raced. She thought of her children, of her career, of everything they stood to lose. But she also thought of the victims of the cartel, of the lives destroyed by the very empire that had given her family its wealth. "We're going to fight," she said finally, her voice low but determined. "But we're going to do it smart." As they left the bar, neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street. David Chun, a detective with the NYPD's organized crime unit, lowered his camera. He'd been tracking Delgado for months, and now it seemed he had a new lead. Back in their penthouse, Jennifer and Robert faced each other in the living room, the weight of their decisions hanging heavy between them. "We can't give in to them," Jennifer said, pacing the room. "But we can't just go to the police either. Not without protection." Robert nodded, his face ashen. "So what's the plan?" Jennifer took a deep breath. "We gather evidence. We build a case. And we find someone we can trust in law enforcement. Someone who can help us bring this whole thing down without getting us killed in the process." As dawn broke over the city, Jennifer and Robert Hawthorne stood at their window, watching the skyline come to life. They were no longer the power couple they'd once been, but something new was forming between them. A partnership forged in adversity, a determination to right the wrongs of the past. Little did they know, their actions had set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of New York's underworld. The clock was ticking, and the game was about to change in ways they could never have imagined. The harsh fluorescent lights of the small apartment flickered, casting an unflattering glow over the worn furniture. Jennifer Hawthorne stood at the window, staring out at the brick wall of the adjacent building, a far cry from the panoramic views of Manhattan she'd grown accustomed to. Behind her, Robert struggled with a stubborn cardboard box, the last of their belongings from the penthouse they'd been forced to vacate. "I never thought I'd miss that gaudy crystal vase your mother gave us," Robert said, attempting to lighten the mood as he unpacked kitchen utensils. Jennifer didn't respond. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the past week like a nightmarish movie reel. The frantic packing, the hushed explanations to the children, the pitying looks from former friends as they downgraded from their luxury high-rise to this cramped two-bedroom in Queens. "Mom!" Tim's voice broke through her reverie. Their 14-year-old son stood in the doorway, uncertainty etched on his face. "When can I tell my friends where we've moved?" Jennifer turned, forcing a smile. "Soon, honey. We just need to get settled first." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. In truth, she didn't know if it would ever be safe for them to reconnect with their old life. As Tim retreated to the room he now shared with his younger sister, Jennifer's gaze fell on Robert. Her husband looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of their circumstances. The anger she'd felt towards him had mellowed into a complex mix of emotions: disappointment, worry, and a stubborn flicker of love that refused to be extinguished. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Robert nodded, setting down the box cutter. They moved to the small balcony, the only private space in their new home. The sounds of the city car horns, distant sirens, the chatter of neighbors created a cacophonous backdrop to their conversation. "I've been thinking," Jennifer began, her voice low, "about what Delgado said, about what your father did, about all of it." Robert tensed beside her. And I think we have two choices," she continued. "We can do what they want, find a way to help them launder their money, become part of this crime syndicate, or we can fight." "Fight!" Robert's laugh was hollow. "Jen, these people, they'll destroy us. They'll hurt the kids." Jennifer turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a determination that took Robert aback. "Not if we're smart about it. Not if we use what we know to bring them down." "You want to go to the police?" Robert's voice rose in panic. "Are you insane?" "Lower your voice," Jennifer hissed, glancing back at the apartment. "And no, not directly to the police. We need to be more strategic than that." She outlined her plan to quietly gather evidence, to build a case so strong that when they did go to the authorities, they'd be protected. It was risky, she knew, but the alternative, becoming active participants in a criminal enterprise, was unthinkable. Robert listened, his expression a mix of fear and grudging admiration. "It's dangerous," he said finally. "So is doing nothing," Jennifer countered. "Robert, we have a chance to make this right, to undo some of the damage your father caused, to protect our children's future." As they stood there, the weight of their decision pressing down on them, a commotion from the street below caught their attention. A group of volunteers was setting up tables, distributing food and clothing to a line of homeless individuals. The sight stirred something in Robert. He thought of his own father, of the lives destroyed by the empire he'd built. He thought of his children, of the example he wanted to set for them. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's do it. Let's fight." Jennifer reached out, taking his hand in hers. It was a small gesture, but it bridged the chasm that had grown between them. The next morning, as the sun rose over their new neighborhood, Jennifer and Robert set their plan in motion. Jennifer reached out to old contacts from her pro bono work, discreetly inquiring about victims of financial crimes. Robert, meanwhile, began the painstaking process of combing through years of financial records, looking for the thread that would unravel Delgado's operation. As days turned into weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. By day, they maintained the facade of a family adjusting to reduced circumstances. Jennifer took on more pro bono cases, building a network of contacts in law enforcement and social services. Robert found work as a financial consultant for small businesses, all the while gathering intel on money laundering techniques. But at night, once the children were asleep, they transformed their small living room into a war room. Maps, financial documents, and hastily scribbled notes covered every surface. They were building a case piece by painstaking piece. It wasn't easy. There were close calls, like when Sarah almost discovered their hidden files, or when a suspicious car lingered too long outside Tim's new school. The strain showed in the dark circles under their eyes, in the tense silences that sometimes stretched between them. Yet there were moments of hope, too. The first time they uncovered a clear link between Delgado's organization and a string of overdoses in the Bronx. The night Jennifer made contact with a sympathetic detective who hinted at a larger investigation already in progress. The morning Robert woke up and realized he hadn't thought about gambling in weeks. As the deadline Delgado had given them approached, Jennifer and Robert faced their greatest test. They had evidence, not enough to bring down the entire operation, but enough to make a start. But using it meant exposing themselves, potentially putting their family in the crosshairs of both the cartel and the law. On the night before they were due to meet Delgado again, Jennifer and Robert sat on their small balcony, the city lights twinkling around them like fallen stars. "Are we doing the right thing?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know we're trying. And right now, that has to be enough." As they sat there, a siren wailed in the distance. To most, it might have sounded ominous. But to Jennifer and Robert Hawthorne, it sounded like hope, a reminder that there were still those out there fighting for justice, just as they were about to do. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But for tonight, they had each other, they had their conviction, and they had a chance, however slim, to right the wrongs of the past and forge a better future for their children. Little did they know, their actions were about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake New York's criminal underworld to its very core. The opulent ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria buzzed with the chatter of New York's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. To the casual observer, it was just another high society charity gala. But for Jennifer and Robert Hawthorne, it was the beginning of the most dangerous game they'd ever played. "Remember the plan?" Jennifer whispered, her lips barely moving as she smiled and nodded at a passing couple. Her midnight blue gown, borrowed from a consignment shop, felt foreign after months of living in bargain clothes. "We're here to gather information, nothing more." Robert nodded imperceptibly, tugging at his rented tux. The weight of the hidden microphone felt like a ticking bomb against his chest. "I still think this is insane," he muttered. "If Delgado spots us, he won't." Jennifer cut him off, her tone brooking no argument. "Now smile. We have a fat cat to charm." Their target was Olivia Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries, and, if their intel was correct, a key player in the money laundering operation they were trying to expose. As they approached her, Jennifer felt a flutter of nerves. Everything hinged on this moment. "Ms. Blackwell," Jennifer said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Jennifer Hawthorne. This is my husband, Robert. We're such admirers of your philanthropic work." Olivia turned, her piercing green eyes assessing them coolly. "Hawthorne," she mused. "Any relation to Charles Hawthorne?" Robert stiffened beside her, but Jennifer smoothly interjected. "His son, actually. We're trying to continue his legacy of giving back to the community." A flicker of interest crossed Olivia's face. "Is that so? I wasn't aware Charles had any living relatives still in New York. Last I heard, the Hawthorne fortune had diminished somewhat." The implied threat was clear. Jennifer felt Robert tense beside her but pressed on. "We've had our setbacks," she admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "But we're exploring new ventures. Perhaps we could discuss some mutually beneficial opportunities." Olivia's eyebrow arched. "Intriguing. Why don't we continue this conversation somewhere more private?" As they followed Olivia to a secluded corner of the ballroom, Jennifer's heart raced. They were walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but their wits and a desperate plan. For the next hour, Jennifer and Robert engaged in a delicate dance of hints and veiled references. They alluded to offshore accounts, to connections with certain South American investors, to the need for discretion in financial matters. All the while, the hidden microphone captured every word. Olivia listened, her expression inscrutable. Just when Jennifer thought they'd failed, the CEO leaned in close. "You know," she said, her voice low. Your father and I had a very special relationship. It's a shame how things ended. But perhaps it's time for the next generation to step up. Robert's hand tightened on Jennifer's arm. This was it, the opening they'd been waiting for. But before they could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Jennifer's blood ran cold as she spotted Victor Delgado, flanked by two burly men, scanning the room. We need to leave, Robert hissed. Now. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Is there a problem? Jennifer forced a laugh. Not at all. We just remembered a prior engagement. Perhaps we could continue this conversation another time. As they made their excuses and hurried towards the exit, Jennifer's mind raced. Had they been made? Was Delgado here for them? Or was it just a coincidence? They were halfway to the door when a hand clamped down on Robert's shoulder. Mr. Hawthorne. Delgado's smooth voice sent chills down Jennifer's spine. What a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see you in such affluent company. Robert turned, his face a mask of forced calm. Mr. Delgado, we were just leaving. Delgado's grip tightened. Nonsense. The party's just getting started. In fact, I insist you join me for a drink. We have much to discuss. As Delgado steered them towards a private room, Jennifer caught sight of Olivia Blackwell watching them intently. The CEO's expression was unreadable, but Jennifer could have sworn she saw a flicker of recognition, concern. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded to Jennifer like a prison cell locking. Delgado's genial demeanor vanished, replaced by cold fury. Did you really think you could play me? He snarled. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little investigation? Jennifer's mind raced. How much did he know? Had their entire plan been compromised? Robert stepped forward, placing himself between Jennifer and Delgado. We can explain. The crack of Delgado's fist connecting with Robert's jaw echoed in the small room. Jennifer bit back a scream as her husband stumbled. No explanations, Delgado said, his voice deceptively calm. You had your chance to cooperate. Now you'll learn what happens to those who cross me. As Delgado's men advanced, Jennifer's hand closed around the small canister in her clutch, a last resort measure she'd hoped not to use. With a silent prayer, she raised the pepper spray and pressed the nozzle. Chaos erupted. Through stinging eyes and choking breaths, Jennifer grabbed Robert's arm and bolted for the door. They burst into the hallway, alarms blaring as the pepper spray set off the hotel's security systems. As they raced through the panicked crowd, Jennifer's mind whirled. Their cover was blown, their carefully laid plans in shambles. But they had evidence, the recorded conversation with Olivia, the confrontation with Delgado. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They burst out onto Park Avenue, the cool night air a shock after the stifling tension of the gala. Without a word, they ran, leaving behind the glittering world they'd once called home. Blocks away, in a dingy alley, they finally stopped, gasping for breath. Robert leaned against a wall, blood trickling from his split lip. What now? He panted. Jennifer looked at her husband, at the man who'd lost everything and was now risking what little he had left to make things right. In that moment, she felt a surge of love and determination. Now, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. We take the fight to them. No more hiding, no more playing defense. It's time to bring it all down. As sirens wailed in the distance and the New York night closed in around them, Jennifer and Robert Hawthorne stood at the precipice of a war they'd never imagined fighting. But they were in it together, armed with the truth and a desperate determination to reclaim their lives and their integrity. The real battle was just beginning. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on Jennifer and Robert's haggard faces. It was 3 a.m., and the events of the charity gala still had their hearts racing. Across from them sat Detective David Chun, his eyes sharp despite the late hour. So let me get this straight, Chun said, his voice low. You've got recordings of Olivia Blackwell hinting at illegal activities, and Victor Delgado practically confessed to threatening you? Jennifer nodded, sliding a USB drive across the sticky tabletop. It's all here. Not enough for a conviction, but enough to justify a deeper investigation, Chen finished, pocketing the drive. He leaned back, studying the couple. You know, when I started tracking Delgado, I never expected to stumble onto something this big. The Hawthorne name. It opens a lot of doors. Robert flinched at the mention of his family name. Not all of them good, he muttered. Chen's gaze softened slightly. Look what your father did. That's not on you. But what you're doing now, that takes guts. A waitress approached, refilling their coffee cups. As she walked away, Chun leaned in closer. I've got to be straight with you both. What you're proposing, going after Blackwell Industries and Delgado's entire operation. It's dangerous. These people have connections everywhere. Judges, politicians, maybe even in the department. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine, but she steeled herself. We know the risks, but we can't back down now. Not when we're so close. Chun nodded slowly. All right, here's what we're going to do. I've got a small team I trust, officers who've been trying to crack this case for years. We'll work together, but everything has to be off the books for now. You two will be our eyes and ears on the inside. As Chun outlined the plan, Jennifer felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were really doing this, taking on one of the most powerful criminal networks in New York. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer and Robert threw themselves into their new roles. By day, they continued their facade of a family struggling to rebuild. Jennifer took on more pro bono cases, focusing on victims of financial crimes. Each client's story added another piece to the puzzle they were assembling. Robert, meanwhile, leveraged his financial expertise to trace the complex web of transactions linking Blackwell Industries to various front companies. Night after night, he pored over ledgers and bank statements, looking for the thread that would unravel the entire operation. Their apartment became a war room, walls covered in charts and photographs. They were building a case piece by painstaking piece. But it wasn't just about gathering evidence. As they delved deeper into the world of white-collar crime and its victims, both Jennifer and Robert found themselves changed. The arrogance and entitlement that had once defined their lives gave way to a newfound sense of purpose. One rainy Tuesday, Jennifer sat across from Maria Rodriguez, a cleaning lady who'd lost her life savings to one of Blackwell's investment scams. As Maria sobbed, recounting how she'd have to delay her retirement, Jennifer felt a surge of anger and determination. We're going to make this right, she promised, gripping Maria's hand. All of it. That night, as she recounted the story to Robert, she saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with, compassionate, driven, determined to make a difference. But their mission wasn't without its challenges. There were close calls, like when Sarah almost discovered their hidden files, or when a black SUV followed Robert for 3 blocks after a meeting with Chun. The strain showed in the dark circles under their eyes, in the tense silences that sometimes stretched between them. Yet there were moments of hope, too. The night they uncovered a direct link between Blackwell Industries and a series of foreclosures in Queens. The morning Robert woke up and realized he hadn't thought about gambling in weeks. As they built their case, Jennifer and Robert also worked to rebuild their relationship. Late-night strategy sessions turned into conversations about their fears, their hopes for the future. They rediscovered each other, not as the power couple they'd once been, but as partners in something greater than themselves. 6 weeks into their investigation, they hit a breakthrough. Robert, bleary-eyed from another all-nighter, burst into the bedroom where Jennifer was getting ready for court. "I found it," he said, his voice hoarse with excitement. The smoking gun. He spread a series of documents on the bed. Jennifer's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. Bank transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts, all leading back to a single source. "It's not just Blackwell," Robert explained. "It's a whole network. Politicians, judges, even some cops. They're all in on it." Jennifer felt a mix of elation and dread. This was what they'd been working towards, but the scale of the corruption was staggering. "We need to tell Chin," she said, but as Robert reached for his phone, a loud bang echoed through the apartment. The bedroom door burst open, revealing 2 men in suits, guns drawn. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne," one of them said, his voice cold. "Mr. Delgado would like a word." Jennifer's heart raced as she looked at Robert. In his eyes, she saw the same determination she felt. They'd come too far to give up now. As the men led them out of the apartment, Jennifer's mind raced. The evidence was hidden, safely encrypted on a drive Chen had given them. But now, facing the very real threat of Delgado's wrath, she realized the true cost of their mission. In the back of a black SUV, speeding through the streets of New York, Jennifer reached for Robert's hand. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They had started this journey seeking redemption for past sins. Now, they were fighting for something much bigger: justice for countless victims, and a chance to reshape the city they called home. As the car turned down an unfamiliar street, Jennifer squeezed Robert's hand. The real test was just beginning. The warehouse loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the twilight sky of the Brooklyn waterfront. Jennifer and Robert exchanged a glance as they were ushered out of the SUV, the grip of their captors tight on their arms. The salty air carried a hint of diesel and decay, a far cry from the manicured world they once inhabited. Victor Delgado stood at the entrance, his usually impeccable suit looking slightly rumpled. His eyes, normally cold and calculating, now burned with barely contained fury. "The Hawthornes," he sneered. "I must admit, you've led us on quite a chase, but playtime is over." As they were marched inside, Jennifer's mind raced. Where were the children? Had Chun received their last encrypted message? The warehouse interior was a maze of shipping containers and heavy machinery, the perfect place to make someone disappear. Delgado led them to a makeshift office, where Olivia Blackwell sat perched on the edge of a desk, her designer heels incongruous against the gritty surroundings. "I'm disappointed, Robert," Olivia said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Your father and I had such high hopes for you, and now look at you, throwing it all away for what? A misguided sense of justice." Robert straightened, meeting her gaze. "My father's legacy was built on blood money and broken lives. I'm trying to make it right." Delgado's laugh was harsh. "Make it right? You naive fool. Do you have any idea how deep this goes? The people we protect, the power we wield." "We know enough," Jennifer interjected, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Enough to bring it all down." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Olivia's face, but Delgado merely smirked. "You think your little investigation matters? We own judges, politicians, half the damn police force. You're nothing but a minor inconvenience." As if on cue, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass echoed through the warehouse. Delgado's men burst in, faces pale. "Boss, we've got company. Cops. Lots of them." Delgado's composure cracked. He grabbed Robert by the collar. "What did you do?" he snarled. But before Robert could answer, the windows exploded in a shower of glass. Smoke grenades rolled across the floor, filling the air with acrid fumes. Through the chaos, Jennifer heard a familiar voice. "NYPD. Everybody down." Detective Chen's team swarmed the warehouse, bulletproof vests gleaming in the harsh fluorescent light. Jennifer felt a surge of relief as she spotted Chen himself, gun drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. In the confusion, Robert grabbed Jennifer's hand. "Run!" he shouted over the din. They sprinted through the maze of containers, hearts pounding. Behind them, they could hear Delgado bellowing orders, the sound of gunfire erupting sporadically. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with Olivia Blackwell. The CEO's usual poise was gone, replaced by desperation. "Wait," she gasped. "I can help you. I know things, names, dates, account numbers. I can bring the whole thing down." Jennifer and Robert exchanged a look. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. "Why should we trust you?" Robert demanded. Olivia's laugh was bitter. "Because I'm tired. Tired of the lies, the constant fear. Your father, he wanted out too in the end. That's why they killed him." The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. All this time, he'd blamed his father, never knowing the full truth. Before they could respond, a shot rang out. Olivia crumpled to the ground, blood blossoming on her white blouse. Victor Delgado stood behind her, gun raised. "No more loose ends," he snarled. Time seemed to slow. Jennifer saw Delgado's finger tighten on the trigger. She moved without thinking, shoving Robert aside as the gun went off. Pain exploded in her shoulder. She stumbled, the world spinning around her. Through the haze, she saw Robert tackle Delgado, the two men grappling for the weapon. "Jen!" Robert's voice sounded far away. "Stay with me, baby. Please." She tried to respond, but darkness was closing in. The last thing she saw was Detective Chun kneeling beside her, barking orders into his radio. When Jennifer opened her eyes, the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room greeted her. Robert sat beside her bed, his face haggard but his eyes shining with relief. "Hey there, fighter," he said softly, taking her hand. Over the next few days, as Jennifer recovered, the full scope of what they'd accomplished became clear. Chen's team, armed with the evidence Jennifer and Robert had gathered, had launched a massive operation. Arrests were being made across the city, corrupt cops, judges, politicians. The Blackwell Delgado empire was crumbling. But the victory came at a cost. As Jennifer watched the news from her hospital bed, she saw families torn apart, careers destroyed. The very system they'd sought to change was being shaken to its core. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked Robert one evening, as the setting sun painted the sky outside her window. Robert was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we did what we had to do, and maybe now we can start to rebuild. The right way this time." As Jennifer recovered, they began to plan for the future. There would be trials, testimonies to give, a long road ahead. But for the first time in months, they felt hope. One afternoon, as they sat together in the hospital garden, Robert turned to Jennifer, his eyes serious. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to really hear me," he said. "I'm sorry for everything. The gambling, the lies, all of it. You deserved better." Jennifer squeezed his hand. "We both made mistakes, but look at what we've accomplished together. That's what matters now." As they sat there, surrounded by the quiet bustle of the hospital, Jennifer realized something. They had started this journey seeking redemption, trying to right the wrongs of the past. But somewhere along the way, it had become about more than that. It was about justice, about giving voice to the voiceless, about fighting for a better future. The road ahead would be challenging. There were still threats to face, a system to reform, a family to rebuild. But as Jennifer looked at Robert, she knew they were ready. Together, they had faced down their demons and emerged stronger. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day was coming, and with it, the chance to write a new chapter, and not just for themselves, but for their city and all those who called it home. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and onlookers. A sea of faces turned expectantly towards the imposing doors. Jennifer Hawthorne stood at the top, her hand clasped tightly in Robert's. The scar on her shoulder, a permanent reminder of their ordeal, pulled slightly as she took a deep breath. "You ready for this?" Robert asked, his voice low. Jennifer nodded, her eyes scanning the crowd. She spotted familiar faces: Maria Rodriguez, the cleaning lady who'd lost her savings; Detective Chun, looking sharp in his dress uniform. Even some of their old society friends, their expressions a mix of curiosity and judgment. As they descended the steps, the crowd erupted in a cacophony of questions and camera flashes. Jennifer felt Robert tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand reassuringly. They had prepared for this moment for months. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, how does it feel to be the key witnesses in New York's trial of the century? Robert, any comment on your father's involvement in the Blackwell Delgado syndicate? Jennifer, are you worried about retaliation from those still loyal to the organization?" They pushed through the throng, offering no comment. Their testimony would speak for itself. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Victor Delgado sat at the defense table, his usual swagger replaced by a look of barely contained rage. Beside him, a host of other defendants, corrupt politicians, judges, business leaders, filled the rows. As Jennifer took the stand, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. She recounted their story, the initial discovery of Robert's gambling debts, the revelation of his father's criminal ties, their decision to fight back. With each word, she could see the jury hanging on every detail. Robert's testimony followed, raw and emotional. He spoke of his father's legacy, the pressure to maintain their empire at any cost. When he described the moment he realized the true extent of the corruption, his voice broke. "I had a choice," he said, his eyes meeting Jennifer's across the courtroom. "I could continue the cycle or I could try to make things right. Thanks to my wife, I chose the latter." Days turned into weeks as the trial progressed. More witnesses came forward, former employees of Blackwell Industries, victims of their financial schemes, even a few turncoat members of the organization hoping for leniency. Throughout it all, Jennifer and Robert remained united. They attended every day of the trial, offering support to other witnesses and working closely with the prosecution team. But the process took its toll. There were sleepless nights, haunted by memories of the warehouse showdown. There were threatening letters slipped under their apartment door, causing them to increase security measures for their children. One particularly difficult day, after a grueling cross-examination that dredged up painful memories, Jennifer found Robert in the courthouse bathroom, splashing water on his face. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer placed a hand on his shoulder. "We can and we will," she said firmly. "Think of all the people counting on us. Think of the future we're fighting for." As the trial neared its conclusion, the defense launched a desperate final attack. They portrayed Jennifer and Robert as opportunists, seeking to absolve themselves of their own guilt by bringing down others. They dredged up Robert's gambling past, insinuating that the couple was merely seeking revenge for financial losses. But the mountain of evidence was insurmountable. Bank records, wiretaps, testimony from dozens of witnesses. It all painted a damning picture of a vast criminal enterprise that had infiltrated every level of New York society. On the day of closing arguments, the courtroom was packed. Jennifer sat in the front row, her hand intertwined with Robert's, as the prosecutor delivered a passionate final statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice ringing through the hushed room. "What we've seen over these past weeks is not just the trial of Victor Delgado or Olivia Blackwell. This is a referendum on the very soul of our city. Will we allow the powerful to operate above the law, to crush the dreams and livelihoods of ordinary citizens? Or will we stand up and say, 'No more'?" As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, Jennifer and Robert retreated to a quiet corner of the courthouse. They had done all they could. Now it was in the hands of 12 strangers. The wait was excruciating. Hours stretched into days as the city held its breath. Finally, on a crisp autumn morning, the verdict came in. Guilty. On all counts, the courtroom erupted in a mix of cheers and sobs. Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face as she embraced Robert. They had done it. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. As they emerged from the courthouse for the last time, the steps now crowded with supporters and well-wishers, Jennifer felt a profound sense of closure. The nightmare that had begun with Robert's gambling confession had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined. A catalyst for change, a chance at redemption. Detective Chun approached them, a rare smile on his face. "You two did good," he said simply. "The city owes you a debt it can never repay." In the days that followed, as the full impact of the verdict rippled through New York, Jennifer and Robert faced a new challenge, rebuilding their lives in the aftermath of the storm. They sold their remaining assets, using much of the money to establish a foundation dedicated to helping victims of financial crimes. Jennifer threw herself into pro bono work, while Robert used his financial expertise to advise small businesses and community organizations. Their children, initially resentful of the upheaval, began to understand the importance of what their parents had done. Family dinner conversations, once centered on social events and business deals, now revolved around ethics, justice, and making a difference in the world. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through Central Park, Robert turned to Jennifer. "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for everything that happened. It opened my eyes to what really matters." Jennifer smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. "We lost a lot," she admitted, "but what we gained, that's priceless." As the sun set over the city skyline, casting a golden glow over the park, Jennifer and Robert Hawthorne looked towards the future. They had paid a high price for the truth, but in doing so, they had reclaimed their integrity, strengthened their bond, and helped shape a better New York for generations to come. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but as they walked home to their modest apartment, where a future full of purpose and meaning awaited them, they knew that every step had been worth it. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button below and join our community. Based on your interests, we've picked this story for you that's showing on your screen right now. Click to watch it now. We're sure you'll love it. See you next time.